Greetings and welcome to what is officially our fourth episode of Modern Modding Podcast, and this is the third podcast in our special Morrowind's 15th anniversary series, celebrating 15 years of modern modding. Today we're going to be talking about the province mods, the past, present and future, and obviously this is a bit of an exciting topic, I would say. The province mods like Tower Rebuilt, Skyrim in the Nords and Province Cyrodiil have long been synonymous with Morrowind modding, and indeed Tower Rebuilt was started even before Morrowind released. So, from the very beginning, the history of the province mods and the Morrowind modding community as a whole have been intertwined. But before we get ahead of ourselves, let's first introduce our panel of guests for today's discussion. If you'd all please, introduce yourselves.
So, hi for everyone, I'm Alistair, also on Project Tamriel Forum. I am known as Mauritius, and at Nexus I'm known as Memento Mauritius.
Hello everybody, I'm Atrayonis, also known as Anoni Troll at some of my older accounts.
I'm Mortimer, also known as Mortimer, also known as Mort. Yeah, that's it.
I am Thomas Roos. I normally just use this nickname. Or Thomas, are you?
Well, thank you all for agreeing to do this podcast with me today, and now we have a few people from a few of the different province mods here, some of which perhaps don't need an introduction, but to start out with, if you'd like to talk a bit about each of the province mods, your role on the various teams, and what your experiences are with each of these massive mods, we'll get right into it. And of course, feel free to go into as much detail as you want. I'm hoping to keep this podcast, fairly open discussion.
So for the longest time I was a lurker in the Tamriel Rebuilt IRC channel, just drifted in and out every couple of years, and in 2015 I finally made a showcase and soon after joined as a webmaster. My experience with Tamriel Rebuilt so far has been involved mostly at the very top level as a lead developer, coordinating people, resources, and the website. Yeah, I'm afraid I don't have that much experience with the old times, except as an outsider, and not all that much experience as an actual developer.
I started looking at TR way back in like 2009, which it seems like a long time ago, but a lot of people were around way before me. When I was first aware of the project, I immediately made an account, signed up, made a showcase, and got accepted as a quest developer. I think my first quest ended up being in Necrom, which started my long series of only doing temple quests for TR for years. I saw each of the province mods start, which was very exciting that people would even think of making Cyrodiil and Skyrim. I've kind of been involved in those a little bit in terms of writing and NPCing, but most of my work is still in TR.
I have been a TR developer for around a year now. I initially joined for doing concept art and just a way of creative expression, really. And after a while I started looking into writing things about orcs and Orsinium, which led to me posting these things in HR 427, which then got a lot of activity back and sort of got revived, and I developed HR 427 now with a couple of other people.
So I'm mainly Project Cyrodiil developer, and I'm just interior worker, but sometimes I work on various 3D models to fix stuff like texture seams or so. I'm also trying to resurrect Elsewhere project, but at this point it's only concept, because there's not too much people working around. There was the project Outreach. When I first hear about it, I was very excited, but this project is in hiatus at this point. Mm, as developer, but I just did a couple of interiors, really not too much for the projects.
So Province Mod aside, I'm also one of the few guys who has writing rights to Tamriel data itself. There's like 2 or 3 of us who compile the assets from the individual province mods and release it every now and then. This is not quite part of my work on TR. It's a bit separate from all the province mods, really.
So, talking a bit about the history of the province mods next, I know we don't have a lot of old-timers here, but if you'd like, if you can each talk a bit about the history of each of the projects you're working on, such as Tamriel Build, or Project Tamriel, or the Hierarch for 2017, we'll just do that for a bit.
Well, I guess we can and should start with Tamriel Rebuild, which has been around for pretty much forever. It's by now again well known that it is slightly older than Morrowind itself. Was first started by people on the forum that were a bit flabbergasted that Bethesda would release a game which did not contain an entire province. So they set about to create the entirety of at first Tamriel, and then after a couple of years, 2 or 3 I think, only Morrowind. There is not quite a lot known about that era anymore. The old website is all but gone. The old websites. There are a couple of mirrors at the web archive, and there's 1 or 2 people from back then still around. But that's about it.
Part of the reason that they switched from trying to do all of Tamriel to just Morrowind was before the game was released. The plan was for Morrowind to be semi-randomized, similar to Daggerfall. And this exists in one of the concept maps. You can see it has certain cells listed as semi-randomized, certain cells as being fully customized, like Vivek and Daggerthur would be completely custom-made, but a lot of the wilderness around Morrowind would have been randomized. So the whole concept of doing all of Tamriel seems a lot more feasible when most of it is randomly generated. And I think once they realized that all of it was going to be handmade, they drastically scaled their visions of scope down.
Yeah, that's not quite what happened. They did have the expectation to finish Morrowind within a year or 2 years, and were already trying to jump down on the next bits in Blackmarsh, I think. But once it became apparent that what they had created for the very first iteration of Morrowind was basically semi-random, garbage, that they started to crack down and restart it properly. And that's when they scaled it down back from Tamriel to Morrowind. Well, in the beginning, Tamriel was a couple of individual projects. The best survivors known are Necrom and Silkra Tower and a couple of others. They became a bit more standardized with a global hierarchy, and that's when the split between Tamriel Build proper and Silkra Tower happened, due to creative differences in how to interpret lore and how true to stay to it. And for the next few years are basically just chucked forward with its head developers, the claim system we all know and love, where you have to first create a showcase, then you can claim a bit of exterior, interior, or a quest or whatever, finish it, have it reviewed, and then merged into the section files or wherever. And the biggest changes over the years were the abandonment of the head of system. In the old days you had head of exteriors, head of interiors, etc. And basically they were the linchpin that the development was set around. That was abandoned in favor of a general lead developer system, which we have since 2015 now. And the other big change was, of course, that we would start editing Vardenfell, which was something that the original project didn't want to do until a rather large discussion in 2014, and which we have only started actually implementing 2015-16, and the most visible parts are right now with the faction unification. Other than that, over the years, certainly the technical system has changed a bit. For the longest time, Temporary Rebuild was sitting on PHP BB2 forum, which was not really updated technically since its first inception in, I don't quite know, 2004, 2005, something like that. So a large change in workflow happened when we moved the site completely to Drupal in 2016. And this is basically where we are now.
Well, I am both a relatively new member of both Tamarind Rebuild and Hyrock 427, and I can't tell much about both in the sense of their history, but Hyrock 427 basically started as a project mostly run by SG Monkey, which is who is a admin on the Project Tamriel forums. It was basically his project, and it eventually got inactive and was abandoned. And I basically, like around February or January, like I said, I posted some things about Orcs and Orsinium, and I basically tried to revive the project in some way.
Well, I can't help much because I don't know too much about Project Tamriel, because as I said, I'm also fairly new to the community. I don't know much about stuff was going on when the Skyrim Home of the Nords Project Cyrodiil and Project Outreach had different forums and stuff. So I just came here when they got one forum for every project. I remember there was something like Argonia project from ZegG, but there's nothing I can tell about it, unfortunately.
Oh yes, I believe the original Black Marsh project died due to a hard drive failure. The main developer lost all their progress and stuff, so that project's pretty much dead.
I think that was mostly vaporware to begin with, but I like to believe that someone was actually putting an honest effort into it. It's a shame either way.
Well, if I remember correctly, there is some files floating on Nexus, so... But there's not too much stuff inside. Just part of the landmass, and that's probably it.
And now, specifically regarding Hyrock 427, I have to say I was really surprised to see that project get revived. I think I speak for everyone when I say that I just assumed it was dead at this point.
Yeah, it was really... Yeah, well, it was abandoned. I mean, it was, but I've been really trying to get to post things there to get people involved, and to get the discussion going again, basically, because the only unfortunate thing is that we can't really do implementation right now, but so far we have been planning a lot lately, and I think it shows off.
Yeah, about the Hyrock project, at some point I was the part of another project we called it Hyrock Land of Magic, but we got some files and stuff we were working with guy. If I remember correctly, he had the nickname Skuma Steve or something like that, and we were trying to revive the High Rock project back then, but it happened that, if I remember correctly, we got hide map without SG Monkey approve, so we just needed to finish this project at this point because we got the file when he didn't want us to have it. So but I was a bit nervous back then, but I think maybe it's good it happened like that because now we have more competent people to start to work on this project. When back then I have too big expectation and too low skills to make province mod like that. I think that's good. I got some new skills, mainly thanks to Morrowind Modding Madness and stuff, because I needed to learn a bit stuff about animation and stuff when I was working with Drunken Mudcrab. So he has awesome ideas but lack of skills for those things. So I needed to start to do something about it.
One of the best parts of having the Project Tamriel Discord is that the lines really do kind of blur between the projects. You have people like Atreonis who will go between TR, Project Cyrodiil, Home of the Nords, and High Rock and post in every single one on a fairly consistent basis. There's a lot of people who visit every project and who, if they're not contributing directly to the projects, they're contributing to the discussions of the lore, of the planning, and really that's what a lot of it boils down to, is having a plan that you can execute in a reasonable way. Even though High Rock doesn't have a single cell made that I know of, at least, the daily discussions take place on the lore, on the demographics, on what do the people there wear, what do the people there eat. Such in-depth discussion goes on all across these discords.
Yeah, Discord has really helped with that, with more direct connection between people who like the projects and the developers themselves.
Right, it probably doesn't start a bit like an advertisement for Discord, but the big thing which it does have in favor instead of the old IRC channels are, first of all, a server-side backlog. So you can scroll back and find out what discussions took place when you weren't around, which was totally new and has considerably changed the way that the mods chat and chat with each other, and the rather unified structure in that there are Discord servers on the same network instead of individual IRC servers which you have to connect to individually with different accounts, etc. And that has changed quite a bit in discussion retention, at least.
So posting pictures is another big part of why Discord has really taken off in the community. Pretty much every day in PT and TR Discord, you'll see someone post a picture of their latest claim of like, oh, here's Dragonstar being finished in Home of the Nords. Like, it's encouraging to see progress like that happen on a daily basis.
That's true. The thumbnails and everything make it much more visible than it was in the IRC channels before. I do remember that basically nobody knew that Project Tamriel had a IRC channel at all, and when they knew, they just wouldn't go there because it was too difficult or something, I don't know. It's considerably easier now, I mean. And we are not at the whim of certain image hosters anymore.
Now, just real quick, jumping back to the Discord thing. I might have, misinterpreted this, but I thought I saw that in the High Rock 427, sort of channel there, that you guys had some new assets that you were already developing for High Rock?
We're not really developing assets just yet. It's mostly just preparing for the development, so things like concept art and ideas on how we can change existing assets, for example, Shoten's Reachman set, to accommodate to our needs in the area that we will probably start working on first, which is the Western Reach.
That's one of the biggest advantages of having a shared resource pool, is that these resources will get made, these assets will get made by people, oftentimes without a specific intention in mind, but that's fine. They'll definitely go to use somewhere, and places like High Rock are quick to take advantage of the efforts of the community in the best possible way.
Oh yeah, speaking about assets, I'm currently working on 2 races, specifically Khajiit sub-races, namely Omes and Omes Rat. Since we've got some lore stuff saying that they are most commonly seen in High Rock, so we could have them as fast as possible. I think I will incorporate every possible Khajiit sub-race at some point, but it's a long way.
Oh yes, and just one more sort of High Rock related question. I know I've been asking a bit about that more than the other projects so far, just because we haven't really talked about High Rock as much on the channel. I was rather curious, since SG Monkey has kind of come back to a certain degree. Has he gotten involved at all with High Rock 427, or to that matter, the rest of the Project Tamriel stuff? Since he was the original host of Project Tamriel, and I believe he was also the one who originally spearheaded the High Rock 427 development.
Yeah, he has mostly left it alone right now. He is also working on I believe he's still working on his own game. He is around. He's mostly around for the site, for keeping the site up and keeping it well maintained. But he isn't very active. He basically let us do our thing, basically.
Well, sort of jumping off to our next topic here. What's going on with the province mods today?
Well, chugging along, needing manpower, the usual, I guess.
TR has seen a massive increase in activity in the past few weeks, more so than almost at any time before. A lot of the old developers, mostly Naman, has come back and has started working on a lot of exteriors. We got a few more interiors modders who are really good at what they do, who have started to take on some of our more important claims for the Old Ebonheart release. As always, we have the same people as always still working on what they need to work on. So quests, dialogue, NPCs. Nomi is still doing his classic Nomi thing, making all of the section files look pretty. TR is doing the same thing TR has done for many years and will continue to do, and it's never been this great in a long time.
HR 427 has been actively busy with planning and jotting down the lore behind HR 427 and basically getting the regions right, getting the cultures right, getting the cities right, basically getting the vision for preparing the vision for HR 427.
Oh yeah, Project Tamriel and Skyrim Home of the Nords are working on their respective claims. Like always, we are probably close to finish South part of the Gold Coast, I think.
I know I've seen for Home of the Nords, I know Dragonstar has at least finished all of their exteriors, which is huge. That city is absolutely massive. I think it rivals even cities like Vivek in size, just in terms of pure interiors, which is insane. I can't wait to see what happens with that city.
Oh yeah, to be honest, I'm more curious about Anvil because this city is massive if you look at the screenshots and stuff. And we are currently at the point of developing of interiors from Anvil for Anvil, so I think we will have some release at some near point of the future.
Karim, Home of the North also has Solitude Forest they are working on, which is a massive area. So once they are able to release that would be a fantastic region to explore.
They recently posted a video, or not a video, a screenshot comparing the size of their work-in-progress areas to the size of Vardenfell. And I believe their current work-in-progress areas for their next release is about the size of Vardenfell itself, to give you a good idea of how large this project is. And that's absolutely insane.
Oh yes, and I believe Solitude Forest is a large chunk of that. I mean, that is a absolutely huge region that hasn't been included in any releases yet.
That is correct.
And also, if I'm not mistaken, I believe Markarth is almost exterior complete, and well, might be getting interiors pretty soon.
There was progress on Markarth, but I don't exactly remember what was being done. I believe they were still touching up some of the exteriors, and like you said, it may eventually be up for interior.
You are right. Markarth is very close to having its interiors started, and it's interesting to see now that we start to get into areas that have already been covered by some of the later Elder Scrolls games, how the interpretation differs between Project Tamriel and Skyrim and Oblivion. You can see it in Anvil, in one of the upcoming releases for Project Cyrodiil, and you can see it in Markarth, two major cities released in those games. You can definitely see the influences both from the later Elder Scrolls games and from Arena, which is where a lot of the lore of these cities comes from. I mean, Dragonstar is, I think, lifted straight out of Arena. And it's interesting to see the interpretation done by these exteriors modders and how they imagine the city to be.
Oh, well, it sounds like there's a lot of exciting things going on, and hopefully that means some more releases in the near future, or at least, something in for Tamriel built, or who knows, maybe High Rock 427 will surprise everyone next year with a massive Daggerfall release.
I think that would be a little ambitious, but maybe in a couple of years' time we will be able to release something for High Rock.
Well, we do have our biannual releases planned, so we should have a March release next year, which does contain a lot of new stuff that's already in the files. We are still aiming to get Old Ebonheart and a bit of the surrounding land into TR mainland, so it will be officially released.
I'm glad you're saying that on record. Now that I can hold myself to that. Part of the reason is because I'm probably one of the bottlenecks to the release, I'm happy to say. Other than a few interiors in the Ebon Tower. Other than a few more
Ebon Tower.
interiors in the Ebon Tower, Old Ebonheart is mostly complete. The sewers and a lot of the interiors got merged recently, which is amazing. I think the sewers especially are some of Rat's best work he's ever done. Some of the interiors, like the Ebon Tower Curia, are insanely detailed. Like, some of the new assets they've made for this are just mind-blowing. Like, they're both incredible and could fit alongside vanilla Morrowind and not look out of place. Like it's such a fine line to walk, and it's been done perfectly. Other than I think there's only 4 more interiors left, and maybe a handful of assorted caves. All of Indoril Thir and all of Old Ebonheart are complete. All that's left really is some of the NPCs in the Ebon Tower. Well, all of the NPCs in the Ebon Tower, and quests to be done. I've been working hard on the Fighters Guild for Old Ebonheart. There are quest claims up for the Thieves Guild and the Mages Guild. And I believe there's something for, I want to say, the Legion or the Archaeology Guild. But that and the Sword Quest, and really these section files are really close to being done, which is very exciting because the last release of a landmass for TR feels like forever ago, but we're on the cusp of releasing honestly the most amazing city that TR has ever made.
That's a pretty bold claim. I do think that Necrom is technically a bit more impressive, but I'm not going to disagree. It's going to be massive. One of the things that I would like to extend on is that Mortimer has mentioned Indoril Thir. That's our section file for the eastern bank of the Thir River, which Old Ebonheart sits on the mouth of. And another word about our workflow is basically we have one large pile of exteriors and assorted stuff which haven't been worked on or aren't worked on, which is TR InDev. It's a separate file. When a region has become developed enough, it's moved into its own section file where we are implementing interiors, NPCs, quests, and dialogue. And currently in this stage are Old Ebonheart, the eastern bank of the Thir, Indoril Thir. These are both fairly close to completion, with Old Ebonheart, well, as he said, almost finished. And Laluthyr on the western bank is a bit less finished, but also pretty far along. And Roaring Bluff in the west coast, yeah, it's being worked on. Let's put it that way. And the rest is off to the future. Our asset progress, which it does not extend Old Ebonheart, is again focused on the Deshaan. And I hope that we are going to see actual exterior progress there as well in the future.
We've also had a couple of assets made for the Thir Valley. So there are also tiny preparations going on for those lands.
Right, that is the actual Thir Valley is south of what we have currently developed and south of the big lake Underarm, which is southeast of most of the current exterior work.
It's a shout out to Asylum, who does a lot of these assets that we're talking about. He has done incredible work working on the assets for the Thir Valley, Athrensis, and the Deshaan. And it's very exciting to see these daily posts of like, look at these mushrooms I made. And it's like, wow.
Agreed, we wouldn't have the progress we do right now without our asset developers. Asylum, first of all, and Zera too. And the few sound developers, which occasionally wander in and out, are doing something as well. So we should have an actual pilgrimage path beginning to get worked on for the next release. Because there are going to be sorry, I need to look that term up.
You're talking about Vlog's path?
Yep, and these things along the path.
You mean the flora along the path?
The gourd harps. Right,
Oh,
the
yes, those.
Melothian gourd harps. They will sound like actual gourd harps, and will make this pilgrimage path, which should extend from, I think it was, from the Velothi Mountains to Necrom, will make that part of the landscape fairly standing out and audibly different from the rest of Morrowind. That too is one of the low-key things that are being worked on.
Well, that all sounds pretty exciting. You guys are kind of setting the hype bar pretty high up there for the next release, especially you, Mort. You're kind of setting this up to be, Todd Howard level amounts of hype.
I stand by my statements.
But speaking of the Thur River Valley, didn't that got a revision in terms of visual design, didn't it?
Different thing. What you are talking about is the northern part of the former Thur River Valley, which has been renamed Anthirine. That has gotten an orange paint shop and different flora. There is more work going on currently, so it should be more or less finished by the March release too. And what Thomas was talking about is the Thur Valley, which is basically a canyon, a Grand Canyon, with mushroom mangrove forests and considerably more orange than the Anthirine is.
Yeah, if you visit the website, you can see some concept art made for the Thur Valley. It's basically the region between the Overlap woods and Fern, a sort of transitional region.
Oh yes, I guess I was referring to the northern Thur River Valley, which I guess got a visual update. Was that in the last release, or is that something that's still to come?
No, that wasn't the last release, but it wasn't quite finished. So it's going to be finished at the time the next release rolls around.
Alright, so sort of jumping over to another sort of topic here. How do you think the province mods relate to the rest of the community, and how are community relations going?
So developing a province mod is basically developing something in its own little bubble. We are always trying to reach out to the other parts of the modding community and are trying to have more public relations than we do right now. We basically have several avenues of communication like Facebook and Twitter which aren't used anymore. And there too is a severe shortage of manpower. We do occasionally get people who try to revive those, but for some reason or the other that never really worked out. And the big difference between province mods and the other parts of the modding community is that the modding community with the end of Bethesda's forum has sort of devolved onto its own little bubble, except the little projects all bubbled together in a Discord or in their own sites, and the province mods stay a bit apart from that. There is overlap, of course. It's all on Discord in the end. But there is certainly a rather sharp divide. People who are generally interested in TR or working on TR, playing it, are already in our Discord or on our forums, and those who are not, those who prefer to look at it from a bit farther away in general, either don't want to play it or have no strong opinion about it either way. There is some feedback, of course, and it's often positive, but the sheer size of the province mods, not only TR but the others, are intimidating. And well, I'm not quite sure.
A lot of the community feedback comes from when a new release is posted on like Reddit. I know the last release, 17 for TR, even such, I guess it could be called a maintenance release, even though it introduced a lot of really cool concepts like the faction merge and an updated TR Travels. Even that got such a hugely positive response on Reddit, and it's like anytime the Tamriel Rebuilt account posts something, it's like it's immediately going to go get like over 100 upvotes. It's going to go to the top of the page no matter what, because people really want these mods to exist. People really want more lands to experience. And so when something like Project Tamriel, like Home of the Nords, posts a new screenshot of their city, like it's going to be the top of the subreddit. I know there's a few people on the subreddit who posted, I think, daily photos of the province mods, both in TR and Project Cyrodiil and Home of the Nords, and they would just post a different photo every day. And this person isn't officially affiliated with the province mods. This is just someone going through the mods, really amazed at what they saw. And it's like, that's amazing that people would be so amazed by it. That now Dark Elf Guy is saying that was him. There's another guy who was doing that completely separately.
Right. The person who posts with our account on Reddit is usually me, so we do get quite a bit of feedback from that, it's right, but most of the Reddit threads, as are the nature, typically tend to go off topic, or are people asking what the hell is TR, which I guess is also some kind of feedback. I mean, it gets the word spread around, but it's also interesting to see that there are a lot of people who still don't know what TR is and what it does. This was especially apparent with the last release, which got cross-posted to our games, and then to subreddit drama as well. That was the first. And the attention from that alone had TR received 10 times as many visits in that day as is typical. Was pretty interesting.
Yeah, that Reddit post really skyrocketed. We also gained a lot of people on the Discord that day.
Oh yeah, so I think the Reddit is pretty good for, promotional material, because they have, 27,000, 28,000 subscribers. It's a good way to reach a lot of people pretty quickly. Alright, jumping to the next topic here. With the cross-project coordination, how are the province mods working together now?
Rather informally. It's not so much a process as it is one of the guys more working on PT popping in and asking a question, or linking a design document, or TR devs going over there and, for example, looking at how Province Cyrodiil organizes the imperial government, so we can take our cues for old Ebonheart. We do have some formal discussions on the forum and now in the Discord as well, but those generally tend to be resolved pretty soon after. So there is, well, I wouldn't say it's bleed, but there is a certain kind of overlap which makes formal cross-coordination not really necessary currently.
Do you want to talk about Orc Switzerland?
That didn't quite work out yet.
Yeah, and we also had that cookie discussion. Always.
Okay, the cookie discussion was also resolved on Discord without actually making it into a formal thread and discussion. So
Luckily.
Basically, the problem is that there are cookies in TR, and Province Cyrodiil had a discussion about, cookies and how they don't quite fit the Empire, as the actual cookies do look, and they do look just like what you could buy in a supermarket. And historically speaking, it would be more accurate to call them biscuits, because that was what was generally in use in Europe and other parts of the world before the kind of cookies that are currently in TR came around. And so we resolved to rename these things cookies and biscuits, and replace the measures and textures basically just an asset replacement and a few dialogue edits. At the same time, these new biscuits will and are also used by Province Cyrodiil, which is certainly better than having TR be the only province mod with supermarket cookies. And if you would go west of the Velothi Mountains, nobody had ever heard of such a thing, and would use biscotti instead, which was an option that was discussed at that point.
This is the best thing I've heard all day.
The cookie discussion was pretty hard and got pretty hot. It is no laughing matter. Cookies are serious business, and there weren't even grandmas involved.
Maybe do you wanna touch briefly on what Orc Switzerland was, rather than just leave it as an unsaid topic? I'm sorry I brought it up, but I feel
Well,
like
okay, so Orc Switzerland. I will need to recap a little bit longer for this. Starting out with, as has been said before, the province mods are really, really, really old. TR, with its starting point in 2001, had to build up a map from nowhere, pretty much. The only maps that existed at that point were the Arena one, and the little in-game ones from Arena, and the little in-game ones from Daggerfall. So the only real Tamriel map at that time was made by Asmodeus, who had more or less the Arena projections. The maps released by Bethesda, starting with Oblivion and later, have a totally different projection. I made some comparison maps using Vardenfell as the key, and in general Tamriel has shrunk to about 2/3 of its size from Arena and is considerably slimmer than before. The land masses for the other province mods that SG Monkey made back in the day were made with the Asmodeus map as a background. And for some reason, I'm not quite sure, TR in the meantime decided that its western borders should be further east than SG Monkey's landmass were. I'm not quite sure what came first, the landmass or the border. However, when I started working on a grid map back in 2015 to deal with the lack of planning maps for TR that actually showed what was in the game, it quickly became apparent that we had a hole in between what TR's landmass actually is and what Project Tamriel's landmass actually is. Those were quite a few little holes in the borders between Cyrodiil and Skyrim and Morrowind. Those were patched out conceptually only. The border area in the southern parts to Cyrodiil moved west, which was no problem because there wasn't anything actually developed yet. However, there is a large gap in between that was, I think at that time it still was Rift Pass and Cyrodiil. So we decided that we would put an Orc Switzerland in there. So basically a tribal confederation of the Velothi Mountain Orcs, which are a thing in lore, but haven't really been implemented anywhere else. And that is Marak Bazul, the Orc Switzerland. So a while ago there was some self-running development on Marak Bazul, which I think was trying to actually start working on it right now and develop claims and ideas that weren't actually intended. So that part of cross-prog coordination, well, has been shelved for the time being, I think.
Conceptually, Rurik posted a little bit a little bit about the Malek orcs, which are the fluffy orcs that live there, and I am, being the orc guy that I am, I expanded a little on that, and I also wrote a little book about it. So conceptually, the Malek orcs are basically progressing quite well. Only the actual work that has to be put into it leaves to be desired.
But the thing about Markul is that it is intended to be there for our exterior developers when we are running out of exteriors to develop. So actually working on it wasn't really quite what we had in mind when we staked out the area and started working on the lore. So that took me by surprise, at least. And the kind of thing they were trying to put in there didn't really mesh with the idea that it was pretty much all orcish and only tentatively held by the Redoran and the Empire, and only on the Redoran part of the border because the Empire didn't want to deal with orcs. So the thing about Markzul is that it is there as an area for our exterior developers to work on when we are running out of exterior work in the future. So it is going to be a certainly a focus on development as soon as there is enough landmass that either we are running out of exteriors to develop, or that we're going to need to fill the border region. So when Skyrim or Cyrodiil move east far enough that it becomes an issue.
Well, this has certainly turned into a fascinating discussion. I mean, we've gotten cookies and Orc Switzerland. Two things I never really thought we'd be talking about when we talk about cross-project coordination. And what's this Eye of Argonia thing that you have gotten on the Tower Rebuilt forums?
That is just currently a map and a name, and a project to keep lore focused. Well, basically, seeing that the Morrowind era games are not really compatible with the later game lore, and Black Mars specifically has been hit considerably with, I wouldn't call it a nerf bat, but it has been hit with a hist bat, which means that basically everything that is going on in Black Marsh is now in one way or the other supposed to be something of a hist plot. So this is a project to keep the world building lore in Black Marsh, which is going to bleed into southern Cyrodiil and southern Morrowind, focused and coordinated between Cyrodiil and Morrowind. So there is not really going to be much more. There is a landmass. I have a landmass ESP that Aleister made, but there isn't currently any plan to go further than this, except for a few assets, some of which already are in Tamriel data and have been for years. They are currently used in one of those Necrom museums, and a few more flora that Asylum has mentioned he wanted to do in the future. That's about it. At least it can't be vaporware when there isn't a plan to release anything soon.
Well, sort of jumping onto a very similar topic, speaking of the cross-project coordination, how are the projects, handling lore and aesthetic vision?
Very carefully. So there's another anecdote I can tell about this. There were works on the flags for Anvil and the like in province Cyrodiil the other day, and when they were compared to the current flags in the vanilla game and Tamriel Rebuilt, they were very 3D and bright, and so in turn they were toned down a bit. And that, along with the cookies, are both examples of visual consistency in between the provinces. One of the big things we had with Tamriel data was release of both low-res vanilla resolution and a high-res resolution. The Project Tamriel mods before all were, I think, exclusively using high-res textures, and Tamriel Rebuild has been using vanilla resolution textures for pretty much forever. This too, so this was a significant unification in style and resolution between our mods. Another thing is that the province Cyrodiil uses sets which both work on better bodies and the vanilla body. This is not quite something that TR does. We are basically only using vanilla bodies, but for users of the vanilla body pretty much should look consistent across the province. And for users with better bodies, well, TR has replaced us, while Province Cyrodiil does not. So I guess they can just keep playing what they have been playing so far.
Like lore-wise, we do need to be careful to not step much on each other's toes. In that sense, especially High Rock, which is still like in its planning phase, so it's mostly just written down. Like for Province Cyrodiil and Shoten and Tamriel Rebuild, it is a lot harder to if they made an asset or if there is an inconsistency in game, it makes it harder to correct it, to rectify that. HR doesn't have this. Well, it does have it does have the problem a little bit with basically the fundamentals of what we want to, with what aesthetic we want to go with, and with what we want to show. But I think generally there is a lot of freedom in that regard.
There's definitely a lot of freedom in each province's ideas of how they interpret the lore into making their provinces, which is great. I know when each province does make something, everyone from every province will come in and they'll discuss it, and those are always open conversations to anyone in the Discord. It's like, oh, we're designing the Reachmen. How would the Reachmen dress? And it's just it turns into an open discussion of all of these different concepts of the factions and the clothing and the speech and how they name their cities. And it's always been there's always been a cross-project coordination between all these different projects. It's always been encouraged, and it's generally always happened with pretty much every topic, which has been great. Thankfully, for a lot of these projects, there hasn't been as much conflict between each other, just by merit of them not being directly bordering each other quite yet. I know with TR, the major thing is how do we rectify vanilla Morrowind's lore to meet our own, specifically with things like the faction merge. I know the rankings for the Hlaalu have been, was it Leilu? It's Leilu. Have been discussed, and it's like it's not so much lore inconsistencies between TR and Project Tamriel projects. It's more of discussions of how we can shape the existing vanilla Morrowind lore to better fit our ideas of how it should be.
Yeah, so about the ranks, that goes back to that decision in 2014 to integrate the mainland with Vvardenfell. Up until that point, the mainland factions were totally separate and were supposed to have a different rank structure with different names. and the discussion was about if we should keep these names, some of these names, and the like. And there probably is going to be a rank change for the Red Run, but the other houses will keep theirs, as far as I remember.
There's also a big discussion on the faction housing on the strongholds. It's still a very recent conversation that's been happening, but in terms of where a place like Leylu or Redoran would give you a stronghold, it's like, yeah, in the vanilla game you're going to get a stronghold on Vardenfell because that's the only thing that exists. But when all of Leylu and all of Telvanni and all of Redoran exists, if you're a high-ranking member, they're not going to give you a shack in the middle of Vardenfell because that place is kind of miserable. So it's kind of coming up with different, and there are plans for mainland strongholds for these factions, and it's exciting to see how these develop. And it's like, what is the mainland Leylu stronghold going to look like?
Yes, Leylu stronghold is the only one of these which probably will be the primary one. The others will have their main one still on Vardenfell and the secondary one on the mainland. Well, secondary, you already have a shack if you are part of House Redoran, so you're going to get a refurbished Nord Meat Hall on the mainland, probably. The other houses, Tress and Indoril, will have sort of two strongholds as well. They will have the actual stronghold with a stronghold which will be about the size of the Vardenfell one, the vanilla one, and then some add-ons or I think the Tress were discussed to get a farm or something. And the Indoril will probably start building a Velocity around their Indoril style stronghold. That is still way in the future. Okay, so just like the ranked structure and stronghold discussion, where the beginning of working on the actual implementation, they were also an end to the previous planning, which started, well, I don't quite know when it started, in the long period of the Aughties when I wasn't doing much more on TR than lurking, I guess. So I'm not quite sure how well that planning went, but I do know in general that it was pretty, well, fairly different from how we do things now. You had TR existing basically only on the rather ancient forum with its unstructured topics scattered all over the place. The IRC channel, which was frequented by quite a few people, I think most even at the time. And then private discussions and private channels which actually decided things, which as we currently focused rather equally on the forums and on Discord, have our discussions unfortunately moved mostly to Discord. Do have quite a few still on the forums, and our actual decision-making process is confined largely to the weekly developer meetings, which is in itself a bottleneck, as people are waiting for Sunday to actually decide on things, and so they tend to sit around for a few days occasionally. The old approach, where the discussions took place behind closed doors in either the admin forum or the IRC channel, of course had the problem that by the time the old head developers, not leads yet, the head developers, retired or went away, a lot of knowledge of what was planned or how it should have been implemented basically disappeared overnight. And we were, for the longest time, busy making sure that this situation could not repeat itself by moving the website to software which would allow for more structured retaining of information. which is why we have implemented several different taxonomy vocabularies, have moved content between forum topics, assets, claims, etc., so that when we start merging things into the section files and the like, they actually retain information where they have been merged into, when they have been merged, etc. And dialogue and quest planning is also done with this infrastructure, so that we also retain the information of when that has been merged. And this has moved the planning quite away from the old monolithic approach and has made it a bit more fluid, with more direct discussions while these things are made. Yeah, while these things are made.
Well, being more of a recent project, we do try to not repeat the mistakes of the past, and try to stay up to date with keeping things documented and planning stuff in. We try to do that by posting TLDRs or from the release of the Discord discussions. The only problem with that is that it isn't really a TLDR anymore. It's more of a summary of what has been said and what has been discussed. And for us, that should make it more easy to read up on discussions that have been had where some people weren't present. And in general, planning has been, for High Rock, planning has been quite loose. Things haven't really been completely set in stone, although we should eventually start doing that. And because most of the discourse is basically going on in the Discord, the developers mostly are present every day, and it makes it quite easier to catch up on stuff.
And I guess the difference between Project Tamriel and Tamriel Build of the old times is that the people who do the planning are already more concerned with implementation than they were years ago. We used to have quite a few more idea people who developed quite nice concepts in their head, and which sound very good on paper or in the forum, but wouldn't actually be able to be implemented at all, which would then lead to the re-implementation phase, where those non-working things were removed and replaced all over again, as planning had to be reconciled with implementation, which would often take 2 or 3 more tries. And I think we have moved beyond that in the parts which we are developing now, and are doing some final edits to the things which we are currently trying to merge into TR mainland. This is hopefully the last rework, and we're going to see how and if that planning we're doing now will measure up to the old idea, implementation, rework, workflow.
As someone whose work exists under the new workflow, and who, I guess, temporarily existed under the old one, I much prefer the new one for a wide variety of reasons. I think it works really, really well, for one. I know TR has always had a problem with redundancy, in that if one person in the old system leaves, the project basically stops. That's why the turnover rate for old heads of different sections was relatively quick, or relatively short. Like, there would be a new head of NPCs just about every few months, I want to say, or it flipped back and forth between a few people. Whereas the new system, there's more redundancy built in. The planning is less centralized, and overall, TR is the best it's been in a long time.
Well, that's certainly a relief to hear, actually.
Oh yes, there's a bit of that hype there again.
Hey, when you see the things I see on a daily basis, you can't help but be excited.
And sort of jumping over to a similar topic with the Elder Scrolls Online, Skyrim, Oblivion, and, all those other inferior non-Morrowind games, are there any influences or ideas being taken from them for the various province mods?
Well, with High Rock being a quite a recent project, I think it does, and also being more closer to a generic RPG, though we do try to make High Rock, unique in its own way. We do take influences from other games, like for example aesthetics. I looked for some of the regions, like for High Rock's Creek Coast. I tried to look at one of the Dragon Age Inquisition regions, and that was Storm Coast, I believe. But that really influenced my way of how I saw that region being basically the weather and basically the feel of the region. And the same could be said for a couple of other games with like small inserts of maybe armor designs or objects or IDs that could basically could fit nicely in our setting.
Talking about Elder Scrolls Online, I think I could tell something. When approaching elsewhere, I'm planning to use some stuff from there, like incorporating Kenarty's Roost Island, which wasn't presented on any other game or lore pieces. I really like to see how ZeniMax approached architecture for Kenarty's Roost, like Indonesian influenced buildings and somehow similar climate. So yeah, basically I think Elder Scrolls Online could be used in some cases, but sparingly, because there's, in my opinion, so much garbage stuff going inside the game.
There is honestly very little to nothing we use from ISO for TR, and Skyrim is set too late. Oblivion has been superseded in our planning and idea taking by Ben Cyrodiil. So, coupled with the fact that Morrowind is a very unique setting which isn't really aesthetically compatible with most other games out there. There's a few outliers, but only a few. Basically, we don't really take influence aesthetically from other games. This is for ideas, yeah. Not officially, so I guess whatever influence has been taken there was either subconsciously or I don't know about it.
I definitely agree with Atre's sentiments. When you're writing quests or NPCs, it's very hard to not just immediately recall the last book you read or the last game you played and think, huh, that would be a great TR quest. And it's like you have to suppress that urge to just put cool things that you've read into the TR canon. It's hard to not get into influences from the media that you consume, but you really have to make a conscious effort to not plagiarize or to put in things that aren't compatible with TR's lore. Because there's been a lot of effort put into TR's lore, and you can't just start throwing things in at random, like ESO kind of does. You can cut that part out if you want. I mean, you can definitely see this in Base Morrowind as well. You see influences from other books or like obscure references to things. Like Vanilla Morrowind isn't a very reference-free game. I mean, they reference things that exist in the real world. There's references to the Something Awful forums in the game. Like, they didn't have very hard and fast rules of what they would and wouldn't include, but they did a pretty good job of keeping it independent from every other game of the era. I mean, you don't see references to like Gothic 1 in there. You don't see references to Baldur's Gate. You don't see references to other games, and that's just testament to how well that game was written, that they didn't have to plagiarize ideas from Lord of the Rings or Elric of Melniboné, things like that. So I'd say it's important that we don't get influences or ideas from other games, because Morrowind, TR, Project Tamriel are intended to be such distinctly separate entities. But as far as my quests are concerned, I would be lying if I didn't say Terry Pratchett directly influences the way I make quests.
My god, I just realized Fargot is Gollum.
What? You're right.
Don't really see it.
Well, it would be kind of interesting to consider what Oblivion would have been like if, the Lord of the Rings movies had been released a few years later, instead of Oblivion just being a straight rip-off of the Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about. I did raise that point a few months ago, and it turns out that some people nowadays don't really see the connection between Lord of the Rings and Oblivion anymore. So this too is part of Province mods back then, sort of.
I believe for Oblivion there was even a mod to put Lord of the Rings in Oblivion, because it was so easy to copy the assets from Oblivion into Middle-earth. And I think that happens with every Elder Scrolls game, but for Oblivion especially is where it really got started. And that gets shut down almost immediately, but it was crazy how identical they could get it in those days.
Yeah, there was one for Morrowind too. I think all of those Middle-earth mods end the same way. They develop pretty far and then get a cease and desist, and then they just quietly die. I don't really know why people try to do it for every new game. It always ends the same way.
Oh yes, I think one of the Middle-earth mods ended that way, but there's another one that is still lightly in development that's continuing from Morrowind. And there's been a lot of Lord of the Rings inspired mods from Morrowind. There was that Isengard mod. There was... what was that place called? Helm's Deep, and a bunch of armor and item mods that are basically Lord of the Rings.
Leave it to Dark Elf Guy to have a completely encyclopedic knowledge of Morrowind mods. I don't know what else I expected.
Oh yeah, I spend most of my days just browsing through mod databases and testing mods, so that's what I do like most of the time. But anyway, sort of going on to another topic here, I wanted to ask, what does the near future look like for each of the province mods? I mean, we're talking in the next 2 years. What's going to be coming down the pipeline?
Well, I personally think the Hyrule project will, in the next 2 years, will get a more, still planning, but we'll get a more coherent vision of Hyrule, and will eventually maybe think about starting to implement some of that, some of those ideas in an actual development file, and start working that out. I think what we already have is already quite promising, and I also hope to do this for the next 2 years.
Well, I cannot tell for sure, since I'm not the lead dev for Skyrim Home of the North and Project Cyrodiil, but I think at least Southern Gold Coast would be released. Maybe not fully, but I'm not saying it wasn't. And for Skyrim Home of the North, well, probably Dragonstar with maybe Markarth.
I know.
If comes to a place like elsewhere, I'm planning to start heavily developing of Canartis Roost at near future, maybe even end of this year, like creating assets, and I already have an landmass file, so there would be much less.
I know Home of the Nords is planning on Dragonstar being in their next release. The biggest roadblock to that is going to be just the sheer NPCing and questing. I've tangentially gotten involved in doing some of the questing for Home of the Nords, and thankfully they have laid out their projects in such a way that pretty much anyone can contribute to it at their own free time as it allows. So I feel like their next project is well within reach, and easily within the next year they'll have Dragonstar release. In 2 years, I think they might even have Markarth and more of that region released as well.
Yeah, definitely. Province Cyrodiil and Skyrim Home of the Nords are definitely making a lot of progress right now.
For TR, the immediate future is pointing at moving old Ebonheart and the Anthirine into TR mainland starting with March, hopefully, and then the next few releases. Additional work on the Deshaan with the first exteriors. In general, we are moving south with exterior work. We are moving west with further integration of existing cities and section files into TR mainland as well. On the backend part, we are currently looking at moving hosters, and this will allow us in hopefully the next year to update our site software and have more organization and even better data retention than we have currently, along with ironing out one of the several kinks, along with ironing out several of the kinks that currently exist in the website, which are the result of inexperience and some problems with the data migration that was going on back in the day.
So as far as the next 2 years are concerned with TR, I feel like the March release should include some kind of landmass, come hell or high water as far as I'm concerned. It should include Old Ebonheart and all of, if not 90% of Indar Ilthir. Going west from there into Hlaaluthir, most of that is done. I think Andathrin is the city that has no NPCs, but it does have everything other than Andathrin is pretty much fully interiored and NPC'd. That region is pretty much almost as far along as what's in development right now. And going west from there, you get into the Rothrorin, which is, again, almost fully interiored, almost fully NPC'd. So it's like this domino effect of once we release the current region, we can shift our focus further west. Like, these regions are going to start releasing faster and faster. It's just a matter of getting the people into the team who can do this kind of work. And it's all coming together very nicely. It's taken a little bit for TR to have a real landmass release, but in the next 2 years, I'm highly confident that there will be more land masses released than in the 2 years before this.
Oh yes, this kind of leads me to a question that we do in every one of these podcasts and interviews, because it is important, and that's, our recruitment question, What can people do to join the project, and is there anything that they need to know before they join the project, and any other details regarding recruitment?
Well, basically same answer like always. Show up, post about what you can do. If you can't work on the CS, work on dialogue, work on questing, work on planning or concept art or anything, then you can at least talk to the people who do and maybe help them out with ideas or start developing your own skills to help the project.
In terms of TR, just before this, I recorded a video of how to make dialogue for TR. I know one of the biggest roadblocks that people have when they look at TR is like, how do I contribute to the project? I mean, let's say you're someone coming in, you don't know how to 3D model, which is fair because I don't know how to 3D model, and I don't think most people do. If you don't know how to do exteriors and you don't know how to do interiors, but you know how to write, that is a huge skill that we can put to use in TR. So I recently did a video just before this of how to put your ideas into the game. And it's relatively simple, but I feel like there is a missing step between writing and implementation. And I feel like having a well-written guide on how to do it is one of the keys to getting more recruitment to these projects. I know people in TR just recently have updated their guides on how to contribute to the project, and that's been a huge help not only to the new people but also to me. When you mod for this long, you tend to forget some things, and having a well-written documentation of what you need to remember to put in, what you need to avoid doing is really helpful. And having a relatively short video for new people on how to mod in Morrowind is really helpful. I know you, Dark Elf Guy, have made videos on how to mod for Morrowind too, and I can almost guarantee that's been really helpful to people trying to get into these projects like TR and Project Tamriel and just modding in general. The barrier of entry is relatively none. It's just this specter of complexity that hangs over Elder Scrolls mods, and people need to realize that there really is nothing stopping you from contributing to these projects. It's more or less entering words into a text box. It's dragging and dropping trees onto a plane. Like, it's relatively easy to contribute to these projects, and having these tutorials available is going to bring more people into the fold faster.
Like, from my personal experience, I've been with Tamriel Rebuild for over 1.5 years now, and I can say I didn't really have a very broad set at first. I basically started with a couple of ideas. I liked just making things, making concept art, and that's how I started. And during the time that I was with TR, I got more actively involved in brainstorming and in writing. And like Mort said, there isn't really a something that is stopping you from doing what you want to do in the project.
Oh yes, I know we say this a lot in these interviews and these podcasts, but it is really important to note that you don't really need to have any special skills in the construction set to contribute to these province mods. I mean, questing is certainly one of the big bottlenecks, and just writing the quests is one of the things that really holds things back. I mean, you can get someone to implement them, but just having the written dialogue done ahead of time is one of the things that often holds back releases, from what I understand. And, it doesn't really take much to learn how to write quests. I mean, really, you just need to keep in mind, dialogue choices, journal entries, when they get activated and all that, and you're pretty much good to go, I think.
I agree, but I feel like now this isn't to say I immediately disagree, but I feel like having experience in the construction set is going to help you writing those out of CS entries a lot, because then you know what the people who are actually implementing it are going to be looking for. You're going to realize, oh, you need an entry here to respond to this quest entry. So definitely, people can absolutely contribute to the projects without even touching the construction set. We've had plenty of contributions to TR that from people who have never touched a CS and never plan on touching the CS. But I will say, if you do enter the construction set and kind of see how the dialogue works, see how the journal entries work, kind of see what's possible with a scripting system, you're going to have a much better understanding of how Morrowind quests are designed and what's required of them.
Oh yes, I definitely agree, and you know, the example questing document we have for like the Let's Mod Morrowind episode 2, which was about quest design, is that it's important to, you know, kind of understand how the construction set organizes things, like separate dialogue topics, the sort of character limit that the CS has. It's like that 512 character limit that you need to keep in mind before you have to divide up a dialogue entry with a in-between choice continue, and things of that nature are, of course, pretty important to keep in mind.
I agree. It's the little things like that where you don't consider them when you're just coming in from a writing perspective, but once you have experience in the CS, you're going to have a much better grasp of what you actually need to write into the text boxes.
Like, it is also something that that comes around with the time that you interact with other developers that you will get to know in when you are working in the team, and learn things from them, and eventually expand your skill set.
Now, sort of moving on, I guess we should bring up the topic of OpenMW. I don't know how far the Province mods are looking to integrate features from OpenMW, but, you know, it is something that we normally discuss in these podcasts and interviews. So, are there any, you know, features that you're thinking about? I don't know, maybe implementing into Tamriel Build, Province Cyrodiil, Skyrim of the Nord, or High Rock?
As it is currently, no. OpenMW is currently still in the process of being an active development to have all of Morrowind's features. And it is really not possible at the scope that the Province mods are to have both a separate version for OpenMW and a version for the vanilla game if they are really incompatible, which using additional features for OpenMW would necessitate. So there will, and we are convinced there will be a time when OpenMW will have features, absolute killer features. That means we will abandon the vanilla game engine and port the game to OpenMW exclusively. But for now and for 1.0, no, we aren't currently seeing that.
For High Rock, it really depends on when we start implementation, where OpenMW is, if it is indeed a really good replacer for vanilla Morrowind, or has more functions, like for example changing things that are hard-coded in the vanilla engine. I can definitely see the implementation start and just go from just using OpenCS to make the mod. But it really depends on what are the features, and is it really viable for us to use OpenMW and OpenCS in that way. Otherwise, we will probably just be using the vanilla engine.
As a Quest developer and scripting guy, I yearn for the day when I can design things with OpenMW in mind. I wish I could use things like the Morrowind script extender functions, but I can't. And I think even when OpenMW releases these things, I still can't. But there's the glimmer of hope that that someday I can use those advanced features from OpenMW.
Well, from perspective of guy who does work on animations sometime, I really look forward to see new animation system with more frame per second, because now Morrowind allows only 15 frames per second, which is pretty annoying, especially when it comes to animating fast moving things like I was working some time ago on improving animations for Melchior Dark's creature looking like Dragonfly, and I needed to add it really fast moving wings, and with 15 frames per second it was not too effective.
Well, I guess we kind of need to wrap this up a bit. I think it's approaching about 2 a.m. over there, so I have just one more question for you guys. And what does the distant future and the end game for the province mods look like? A completed Tamriel, or just a lot of new lands to explore? Or will we all still be here, modding away in 2090?
Well, 2090 is the year when all province mods will have their full release, so I guess we will have quite a bit of Tamriel to explore by then, with another Almalexia rework in progress, I guess.
I thought
Oh yeah.
2090 was just the release of TR, so maybe at that point Black Marsh can begin?
Yeah, probably.
Always
Black
setting the
Marsh,
next
the
goal.
Somerset Isles, and the like. Well, the ultimate game is of course to make all of Tamriel playable. I guess really that hasn't changed, because when you finish one province you have a border that suddenly ends and you still want to go down there and see new sights. Don't think there will ever be a time when we can honestly say that everything has been complete until all of Tamriel is available in the OpenMW engine, and it will need to be the OpenMW engine at that point.
There's always a yearning to create something new and to continue expanding and expanding, and basically complete the vision that we have for Tamriel, or the Elder Scrolls series in general.
Well, I imagine at the point when we will have full Tamriel, we would want to expand it. I mean, do a career and stuff, because there's always stuff modders want to work.
Yeah, someday my children are gonna work on TR, and then we'll have 3 quest makers.
What now? Hey, let's not be hasty here, okay? 3 quest makers.
Developing TR will be fun for the whole family.
Oh yeah, turning these province mods into multi-generational affairs.
Well, they used to be cathedrals for multiple generations back in the Middle Ages. So, I guess that's a new modern incarnation of the same thing.
On a serious note, I've actually kind of noticed this already. There are a number of newer Morrowind modders in the community that are actually children of Morrowind modders, so it's already kind of happening.
Yeah, like, if I recall correctly, Rubberman and Rubberboy, yeah? So they are modding together. On the other note, as I said earlier, Morrowind modding madness really got us something like, I said, I needed to develop more new skills to do some stuff. Also, we got pretty much new stuff going on, like Greatness 7, and creating this seamless cliff neaves for one of our projects. So we are just ahead to new importer and exporter for newer Blender, and we are still in the, I think we are still in the gold era of Morrowind modding at this point, even after 15 years from the release day.
It really is crazy how many people are modding for these province mods, and just in general, who didn't grow up with Morrowind. I mean, we have people on the TR team who are much, much younger than everyone else on the team, who still contribute in a very big way. And it's crazy to see, like, they probably grew up with Skyrim or maybe even Oblivion, but Skyrim especially, and it's like they still get drawn to Morrowind, and that only just goes to show you how big Morrowind is of an influence on people when they first experience it.
My first Elder Scrolls game was Skyrim, so there's that.
Well, sort of wrapping things up here, is there anything else that you guys want to talk about?
I'd say come help out, help with brainstorming, concepts, quest IDs, whatever you think will be good for High Rock, and come join us in our Discord, come chat with us on the forums, and help us make our vision of High Rock come true.
I completely agree with that. No matter what your skill level is or your willingness to contribute to these projects, there's always something you can do to help out, even if it's as simple as sitting in Discord and telling people they did a good job with an exterior. Like, it's so much of an ego boost to see people respond to your work in a positive light. That's worth a contribution all its own.
There is a place in the projects even for people who think they don't fit in because they have no skill sets for the game itself. Every project needs somebody to write documentation, to talk PR, to bring the project to attention of others, and to help organize everything. Those people too are necessary, and we could use more of them always.
You know, in the end, it is all a shared vision, a shared goal that we'll strive towards, and if you can help lay the foundations for that or help out if needed, that would always be appreciated.
Alright, I think that's everything, so thanks for agreeing to do this podcast and showing up today.